you all for joining. I'm sure a time out of your busy diaries over lunchtime that you're wanting to learn a little bit. So hopefully by the end of it, you'll know what good looks like either in the business context or in your own garden as I talk you through kind of the top 10 actions for supporting pollinators and biodiversity. So, just a little bit about the pollinator plan. This is a bit wordy, but I think it is helpful to understand the context. We're actually in year 11 and in phase 3, which will run 2026 to 2030. And as the pollinator plan, we're just about to launch our new strategy mid 2026. In terms of our governance, we have a 15-member steering group who provide us with direction. We're also supported by the Irish Pollinator Research Network, who provide us with the science, and that's a team of independent pollinator ecologists. Just to say, between 2021 and 2025, there were over 75 pollinator related scientific papers published in Ireland. And obviously, we then, or those who are ecologists, then distill it down to evidence based guidelines, toolkits that a layperson such as me can understand. In terms of the co-founders of the Pollinator Plan, both have been recognised for their contribution to insect conservation. Dr. Una Fitzpatrick won the 2022 award for insect conservation from the Royal Entomological Society. Professor Jane Stout, who's the head of botany at Trinity College Dublin, is the current president of the Royal Entomological Society, and she was appointed in 2024. As far as partners and supporters are concerned, we've over 150 government and NGO supporters, various semi-states, 100% of the island's councils, and we're delighted to say business in the community is one of our supporters as well. We have over 400 business supporters nationally in terms of both Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, multi-sector, multi-site. But in Northern Ireland, the likes of the airports, the likes of Gilbert Ash, etc. But we also work with lots of farmers, community groups, and obviously our all important gardeners. And the great thing about the Pollinator Plan is that you don't need to know anything about pollinators at the start of the journey. So when you're looking at your business site, or if you're starting to encourage employees to look at their gardens, there's a little guideline that will help you in terms of choosing the correct actions. So what is the problem? Well, we have over 100 bee species, would you believe, on this island, comprising 21 bumblebee species and 80 solitary bee species. So combined, those are termed our wild bees or our wild pollinators. We do have one honeybee on the island. It's a managed pollinator, semi-domesticated. It's not under threat, so that is not a focus of the pollinator plan. We do know from the likes of the Bumblebee Monitoring Scheme, which has been running since 2012, that 1/3 of our bee species on the island is threatened with extinction. There are all sorts of pressures coming into bear. Some of you will be aware of the term, the 5 drivers of biodiversity loss. So those pressures include loss of habitat, so food, shelter, safety, but also things like pressures from pesticide use, climate change, and even something as simple as how we are mowing our lawns on our business sites or in our gardens. So as I mentioned, the pollinator plan starts to focus on our key pollinators, our bumblebees and solitary bees. And normally we'll see about 6 or 7 bumblebees either on our business sites or in our gardens. So as we start to kind of think about our bumblebees, for example, we kind of need to start to understand how they operate. They're very small creatures, so a very small operating area. But what we know from the science is really kind of the following in a snapshot, and this is as technical as it's going to get. We know that a bee with a full tummy is only about 40 minutes from starvation. A queen bumblebee in early spring needs roughly about 6,000 flowers per day to begin to do the job of pollination of our native hedgerows, native trees, our crops in the field. But we also know that different bee species have different sizes of tongues, so need different sizes and shapes of flowers. So when we think about the landscape, we need to be thinking about a range of flowers appearing in the flying season. We need those flowers, therefore, in sufficient volumes. If one bee needs about 6,000 flowers per day, and we need those flowers in proximity to a nesting site. So we also know that wild bees forage between less than 300 meters of the nest and less than a kilometer, and that an increase in just 150 meter between a nest and food can actually reduce the number of viable offspring by more than 70%. So when we think about the landscape, we're thinking about kind of the flowers appearing spring to autumn. We're thinking about maybe having pockets of those flowers, so food at 200-meter intervals. And the reason that you want them at 200-meter intervals is that most of our wild bees, most of our bumblebees, don't actually make honey, so have no way of storing food in the landscape. So they're more vulnerable than, say, honeybees. So the 5 actions to start to think about on your business site or in your garden, or if, for example, you're maybe a business that doesn't have a physical footprint, the types of things that you might sponsor in the local community. So the 5 actions I'm going to start with are very simple. Always identifying and protecting areas that are in existence already that are good for pollinators. Mowing less in grassy areas, and you must lift the cuttings, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Pollinator-friendly planting, which can be both native but also can be ornamental, and that might be, as I say, a sponsorship aspect. Providing nesting places on larger sites for wild bees, and the elimination, or at the very least reduction, of pesticides. So that's the 5 kind of steps to start to think about on your business site or in your garden. And I'm going to talk you through each one of those. So where to start? If you do have a grassy area on your business site or in your garden, think about doing the reduced mowing and the lifting of the cuttings once you've mown. It's a really exceptional action for all sorts of pollinators. Our pollinator ecologists and our bumblebees love it because what occurs over a period of time is species richness of our naturally occurring wild flowers. What you want through that process is when you lift the cuttings is to reduce the soil fertility. I kind of assumed before I joined the Pollinator Plan that you wanted to increase soil fertility, but actually the cut and lift of the cuttings reduces the soil fertility, which is what you want to generate the natural native wildflowers. So that could be a short flowering mini meadow or a strip along the wall, which is a 4 to 6 week cut starting from mid-April. And that kind of is the start of your no-mow May, which we're in the middle of at the moment. It might be a long flowering strip, which would be a once a year cut at the end of September. And again, when you're cutting, you then lift the cuttings. So if you have a big area on your business site, you might need to speak to your facilities manager or the contractor that's delivering that action for you about maybe staging that cut and lift. Signage and a mown perimeter strip are really helpful tools on the business site, or if you are kind of on your residents committee, inviting them to start to look at taking that action. So really helpful tools. And just to say, the reduced mowing and the lifting of cuttings isn't about rewilding. So you don't have to let your business site go wild. You don't have to let your garden go wild. It's just creating patches of food, your dandelions, your clovers, etc., for our all important pollinators. So when we're thinking about what will naturally occur over time, all of these options that you can see on screen, dandelions, clovers, as I mentioned, your daisies, buttercups, but then moving into knapweed, our vetches, these are all food sources. They're not weeds. Again, before I joined the Pollinator Plan, I kind of made certain assumptions that we had to get rid of dandelions, we had to get rid of clovers, but actually it's the complete opposite. if we allow our gardens to have a little strip, or our business sites to have a strip that is reduced mowing, all of these will appear naturally over time. So no need for expensive wildflower seed mixes. So pollinator-friendly planting might be something that you might consider sponsoring within the local community if your business maybe doesn't have a physical footprint. And really the rule of thumb is trying to choose nectar and pollen-rich plants that will provide food throughout the year, throughout the flying season for the likes of our bumblebees. It can be, as I mentioned, native, but ornamental can be really good as well. Perennials are generally better than annuals. Obviously, for maybe those novice gardeners, annuals will only kind of appear for 1 year and then die off, whereas perennials will sustain year on year on year. Herbs are really helpful, but obviously if you're harvesting for the Sunday roast this Sunday, you'll not allow the flowers to come through. If you're kind of have a certain amount of your herbs for harvesting and then another patch that's maybe for the likes of bumblebees, that's really helpful. But also things like kind of the top 10 bulbs are really helpful. So early in the spring, and you would plant these in the autumn to then flower in the spring, the likes of our snowdrops, our crocuses, our grape hyacinths, really helpful as our bumblebees appear. When you are planting, do consider choosing peat-free compost. There are various products on the market now that will actually help support our peatlands. Our peatlands, obviously an exceptional habitat for all sorts of bumblebees and pollinators, but also our peatlands are a carbon storage mechanism. So if you can choose peat-free compost, that would be really helpful. Also, if you're thinking about kind of buying peat, I heard somebody saying the other day from the likes of Amsterdam or kind of the Netherlands, you can do that. But again, you're thinking about, is that stripping out a climate capture mechanism? So if you can choose peat-free compost when planting, that's really helpful. So if you're at the garden centre this weekend, maybe having a look at those options on sale. Now, these will be obviously our native hedgerows, again, an exceptional structure within the landscape for the likes of our bumblebees. So bumblebee queens will actually nest in the long grass at the base of the native hedgerow. Logically, when the bumblebee queen appears in spring, she'll be looking for flowers. So the food options are the flowers within the native hedgerow. So if you're walking in your park, have a look at the native hedgerows. Are there sufficient flowers within the flying season? Bumblebees will also use the native hedgerow as a linear flight path to protect from wind, rain, and predators. So maintenance is quite specific when it comes to pollinators and biodiversity. And again, you're kind of thinking about that reduced maintenance. So allowing flowers to grow. Just to say, flowers on a native hedgerow grow on older wood. So if you cut boxy every year, you're going to have no food sources for our bumblebees. Thinking about also retaining the likes of bramble and ivy, which I know can become quite difficult at moments, but if you can again do reduced maintenance on the bramble and ivy, that would be really, really helpful. If you are thinking of planting hedgerow, do consider native because of all the food sources within it. There are various species that aren't necessarily recommended, which you can see in our guidelines. The likes of cherry laurel is actually an invasive species, so you should remove it over time from your site or sites. Pollinator-friendly native trees obviously are within your native hedgerow, but you can plant them individually. You could think about maybe growing them from seed. You might allow more mature trees to grow within your hedgerow. But just a note on our pollinator-friendly native trees, do think about the provenance of the trees in terms of, are they from this island? Because a blackthorn, although it's a native tree, if it's imported from Central Europe, actually flowers at the wrong time of year for our pollinators. So if you are thinking of sponsoring the likes of native trees in the local community, just thinking about the provenance, but also if you are sponsoring some native tree planting, be aware that you're not destroying another habitat. So back to how important our meadows and our mini meadows are. Don't just strip out a meadow to plant native trees, because you're destroying one habitat to create another. So nesting habitat, again, will be on the larger business site or in the larger garden. I mentioned the long grass at the base of the native hedgerow. You might look at kind of scraping back some vegetation on a south-facing earth bank, so a nice sunny slope for our solitary mining bees. You may have an old stone wall, which will be really helpful for our cavity nesting solitary bees. So on your business site, you might put a bit of signage, avoid spraying of any kind in that area. You may think about getting some bee hotels, keep them small and compact, about the size of an average size bird box, because if you go larger, they may attract predators or harbour disease. And just to say, you do need to locate bee hotels in a quite specific place. I can send the guidelines through after the webinar, and I know Tracy will pass those on to you. Now, one of the actions we kind of all know, and I knew it before joining the Pollinator Plan, is can we avoid pesticides? And that includes herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. We all know that these very potent chemicals can kill, harm, and disorientate pollinators. But again, it's back to our thinking. What does a weed actually constitute? Again, back to dandelions are such an important food source for bumblebees, but also the likes of bramble, the likes of ivy. So what are weeds and what are actually more helpful for pollinators? So it's back to food, not weeds. Looking at eco alternatives, which are available on the shelves within our garden centres or through your local contractor that you're using on your business site. You may develop a specific reduced pesticide use plan, eventually getting to pesticide elimination over time. And things like removing manually or looking at those eco alternatives will be really, really helpful. Now I'm going to come on to the next 5 actions, which are more about, again, how we're thinking about how we're interacting with the landscape. And just a note on wildflower seed mixes and the likes of bee bombs. There's quite a lot of research that's been done through DCU, Dublin City University, on wildflower seed packets. Many have been found to contain non-native species, some potentially with invasive species such as black grass, which is potentially devastating for the agricultural sector. So just being very aware of what you're buying from the local supermarket, the local garden centre. The rule of thumb really is if it's a brightly coloured mix, it's probably not native species. And just remembering that rather than sowing out an expensive wildflower seed mix, why not consider doing the reduced mowing and the lifting of the cuttings? You'd be very surprised to see a lot of the businesses who've signed up to the Pollinator Plan are starting to see the likes of amazing orchids coming through, and orchids indicate meadow health over time. If you must use wildflower seed mixes, do make sure they're native species of Irish origin. You might even collect local seeds from local wildflower verges that you can plant in your own garden or on your own business site. But if you're thinking about restoring after maybe doing a bit of construction or a bit of earthworks in your garden or on your business site, do consider choosing a fine leaved grass seed mix and then do the reduced mowing and lifting of the cuttings. If, as an organisation, you're considering gifting, do choose from our top 10 guide. So herb packets are helpful, the likes of spring bulbs, sunflower seeds, and as I say, just trying to avoid those wildflower seed mixes, which maybe don't have the correct quality assurance. In terms of honeybee hives, I know some companies have kind of considered sponsoring of actually sponsored honeybee hives. Honeybee hives are actually not a biodiversity action. They are obviously a wonderful hobby. We may have some people who are apiarists on the call today, but just again, logically thinking about it, if you have 100,000 honeybees on your business site, it can lead to competition for food with our struggling bumblebees and solitary bees. So just thinking a little bit more carefully about honeybee hives. If you do have them as part of your core business, that's fine. If you do have them, start educating your colleagues about the differences between honeybees and the likes of our bumblebees and how they operate within the landscape. So now the next two slides are kind of the types of things that you might kind of do in terms of interacting with sort of the pollinator plan. You can sign your business up if you're not already a business supporter, free to join, free to use all resources. You might think about pledging your garden or inviting colleagues to pledge their gardens as part of an employee initiative. So some nice guidelines that will help you step by step through how to do that. You might consider doing a flower insect time count on your business site or in your garden. It's entry level to do this, no experience necessary. We actually got permission from the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme to use their background app structure, so very scientifically robust. And all you have to do is on a sunny day, watch a 50 centimetre square patch of flowers for 10 minutes and literally tap what you see. Couple of rules of the road. You do need to choose a single species such as clovers or dandelions, and the insect must actually land on the flower. But again, nice little guidelines that I will send through after this webinar. So the last action is to start to tell friends, colleagues, your value chain about the pollinator plan. There's very nice guidelines that you can follow or invite others to follow. You might consider sponsoring through the likes of Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, Ulster in Bloom, Pride of Place, etc., and just passing on the guidelines, ensuring they're taking an evidence-based action, and then getting the sponsor recipient to map and then to track by doing flower insect time counts. So again, there's a nice little step-by-step you can take your value chain through. So as we are starting to finish up on this webinar, just to say that it's not all doom and gloom. We now have the science to show that where the actions are taken in sufficient volumes, the abundance and reach of bumblebees is improving. So on the left, we have the large carder bee, which is fairly rare on the island, but kind of found in coastal areas. There's a lovely project that Skerries is running, Skerries Tidy Town, Sustainable Skerries, Fingal County Council, with some sponsorship from Apple Green, and that corridor is developing really, really well. The abundance and reach of the large carder bee has improved within 2 years. Same over on the west of Ireland, the Great Yellow Bumblebee Project is working with Belmullet Tidy Towns with sponsorship from another couple of businesses in the area, one of whom has 26 sites. So again, the abundance and reach of the Great Yellow Bumblebee has improved within 2 years. So if our rarer bumblebees are improving, we know that our more kind of common bumblebees, the 6 or 7 we'll see on our business sites and in our gardens, will be improving as well. So that's really exciting to see. So just to kind of finish on, you now know what good looks like on your business site, in your garden, just what to be aware of, what to avoid, and starting to tell friends and colleagues through passing on the guidelines after this webinar. In terms of direction of travel, for those who are kind of in the larger businesses, just to say the Pollinator Plan is within the Northern Ireland Nature Recovery Strategy. For those working in the Republic of Ireland with clients or with sites in the Republic of Ireland, The Pollinator Plan is a key initiative also within the 4th National Biodiversity Action Plan. So again, you can look at this slide at your own leisure, but it lists out the direction of travel in terms of biodiversity within sort of ESG expectations. So starting to aim to meet the legislative requirements on your site and through sponsorship where possible to meet what is coming down the track in terms of all the legislation to do with nature. So just to finish up, thank you all so much for your time. Just to reiterate, very small changes on the business site or in your garden can have a big impact over time. And as we I suppose, arrive at World Bee Day on the 20th of May and the International Day for Biodiversity on the 22nd of May, just starting to think a bit more about the business site and your garden as to what is more and less helpful. Thank you all very much.